if other psychedelics show you how this world can change
Hmm.
through whatever experiences, uh, the different thoughts, the hallucinations, and all that stuff, they kind of change this world.
Right.
Whereas DMT straps you to a nuclear rocket that blasts you into a different dimension while you're holding on for dear life on the outside, thinking, what the fuck is going on? This
Wow.
entire world completely sheds, and you're in a different dimension.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Mushroom Podcast. Today's guest is Kieran Cuddihy. Kieran is a retired U.S. Army Special Ops combat vet. A couple years back, he was diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury, degenerative disc disorder in his neck, and post-traumatic stress disorder. This led to what is called a medical retirement from the Army, which came at a welcome time for him as his life was in a complete downward spiral. So I think you guys can see where we're going with this one. Enter psychedelic therapy. So Kieran began microdosing psilocybin and LSD while also doing the occasional macrodose to combat his various symptoms where his prescription meds were proving to be ineffective. But he didn't stop there. Like a true seeker, he upgraded to DMT, which is considered to be one of the most powerful psychedelic substances, and the healing results he experienced both psychologically and physically are truly profound. So buckle up for a wild story here, told by the man himself, Kieran Cuddihy. Kieran Cuddihy, thanks for joining us today, man. I can't wait to dig into this conversation with you.
Yeah, it's good to be here. I appreciate you having me on your show.
Yeah, right on. And so Kieran is you are a special ops, 15-year retired Army vet. And the reason why you retired is for like a medical exemption, correct?
Yeah, normally you'd go all the way to 20 years for retirement, and just a series of sort of medical issues kept coming up, and I opted to do a medical retirement. And so you still get the same benefits, and it's almost like you did the 20 years, but you just
Right,
get out a little bit earlier.
right. And so those medical reasons were for PTSD and traumatic brain injury, correct?
Well, so the actual medical reasons, the Army's weird about getting out, and you need to have one specific one, and it needs to be the highest amount. And that ended up being a physical condition. I had a bunch of physical injuries throughout the years, but the whole package deal is everything. So everything neurologically and physically. So yeah, PTSD was definitely right at the top of the list there. Along with other sort of neurological conditions, extreme anxiety, depression, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And so this is not a pretty common theme with a lot of Army vets, right? PTSD, traumatic brain injuries. Is that something that you've had a lot of conversations with people that have while you were in like the special ops? Was that a conversation with people that you were like working with at that time of what was going
No,
on?
yeah, it was just one of those subjects you never talked about, and
Right.
people, it was looked at as an excuse, and you know,
Right.
it just wasn't looked at in a healthy way anyway. So everyone had it, everyone knew everyone had it, but no
Right.
one talked about it.
Yeah.
It's one of those things because it could also get in the way of your job, or that was kind of a fear anyway. The docs would always try to, you know, make people feel better by saying it's got nothing to do. Like, you guys can still continue doing your thing. You just need to report these things so you can get help to do your job better. But none of us bought it. And, you got something on your record and you want to go do a mission or a specific school or something like that. And these things could get in the way. So
Hmm.
basically, we all worked very, very hard to keep our medical records squeaky clean.
Wow. So even that the doctors were saying that you should report these things because we can help you and then you'll be more effective at your job. There was still was it like a reality fear that something would come up on your record, or was that just
Well,
like a
I mean, I think it was a little bit of both. Like, yeah, I'm sure that the docs were we're trying to approach it with the best intentions, but at the end of the day, when something's on your record, something's on your record.
right?
And so I think it was a little bit of both on both ends, right? Like, yeah, sure, we know it wasn't like we didn't believe the docs, but we didn't believe the docs, right? It was that
Yeah.
kind of,
Yeah.
it was just easier to just suck it up
Mm-hmm.
and sweep everything under the rug and keep going.
Yeah.
And that was just the general consensus with a lot of different things, right? It's if it's not a big problem and it's not weighing you down, fucking push it aside and drive on.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think that most people do that even outside of a very intense job like the one that you did and had. Um, that's most people's philosophy.
I think so,
A lot
yeah.
of men I talk to, anyways, is like just head down, like grin and bear it, and like this is part of the stress that you have to go through to to be successful at what you do.
Right.
There's a
Yeah.
narrative
Don't let
there,
the
right?
bullshit get in the way of a good time.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. So before we jump into the fascinating, wild story of your DMT experience, which is where if you're okay with this, I'd love to link to that article that you wrote and put it in our newsletter. That's a very
Yeah,
powerful little short
absolutely.
story. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that'd be awesome.
awesome. But let's dial the clock back a little bit and go back to when you're first curious and interested in psychedelics, and at what age that kind of started.
Um, well, I got into, you know, experimenting with all sorts of different drugs when I was a teenager. I had kind of a colorful uh, background growing up. I grew up, I was born and grew up in Saudi Arabia to um, my parents, expat parents. My father was Irish and mother Canadian. Um, moved to Saudi Arabia in the mid '70s, and I kind of had a very sort of international upbringing, um, lots of foreign travel and stuff like that, and so I was, I think, from a very young age, just naturally inclined for exploration and seeking out new things
Mhm.
and kind of living on the edge. So I think by the time I probably started smoking, hash and weed and stuff when I was 12 or 13 or
Right.
something like that,
Yeah.
and then just gradually progressed into other ones. And so, kind of mid teenagers was sort of like mainly acid, experimenting as kids do,
Hmm.
just having fun, really. Going out with some friends and hanging out at the beach, or doing some stuff, and some mushrooms, and that was kind of it in the sense of psychedelics. I mean, not when I say it, I was doing a lot of them compared to what most people I think would consider experimental.
Right.
I was taking it to a completely different level. I mean, I really truly loved the stuff.
Mm.
It was something. It was opening. I could understand back then that it was opening a door to a different dimension,
Right.
and then it was accessing the ability to realize that this isn't it.
Mm.
And so, for a naturally curious mind, it was kind of the perfect mixture of something to introduce into something that was developing anyway, and I loved it. I
Mm.
treated it with a lot of respect. A lot of people just kind of take a few hits here and there or something and dabble into it and don't really know what they're getting into and appreciate the fun or get freaked out or however they react. Um, I I kind of gone beyond that stage and really started diving deep, and I was lucky to have friends that really respected it on the same level that I did.
Mm.
So we ended up calling ourselves the Explorers Club.
Oh, awesome.
And so, yeah, we had a lot of fun, and we really uh, kind of delved deep in a lot of the stuff, and then naturally we all grew up, right? And
Right.
life brought us into different directions, and we became adults.
Mm.
So I just that was kind of a thing of the past, and life moved on. Um,
But what this
and
Explorers Club was that? Were you guys doing research at the time, or were you kind of just tripping together and
We were just tripping
experiencing?
together. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, this is back in the '90s. There wasn't the internet was just coming out,
Right.
right? So
Right.
there wasn't a lot of research,
Mm.
um, and we were still kids, so we were doing it behind everyone's backs and all that kind of stuff. So we were really just kind of figuring it out
Yeah.
amongst amongst ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Right on. And so then, at some point, the bigger responsibilities of life come on. So tell us about your transition into the special ops and how that came about.
Yeah, I mean, I had a career in the film industry prior, um, and so in my late 20s, I ended up joining the army, which was a little later than most people. But the war over in Iraq and Afghanistan were kind of kicking off, and I just felt like I needed a change anyway. And it was one of those things, as kind of I think most boys at some stage dream about being in the army and going to war, right? So,
Mm.
well, at least I was one of those kids. So the opportunity popped up,
Yeah.
and I had married an American girl, so that gave me access into the States. And to keep that story short, I was living there, and it was just easy for me to join the U.S. Army.
Right.
So I joined as a combat cameraman um, initially because with my film background, I'd gone to film school, I'd been in the film industry, I'd done all that stuff. I figured I could bring something to the table. And I loved it. It was really cool. Did that for a few years, deployed in a couple places, and saw a lot of combat.
Mm.
And I really liked it. It was this kind of, I really had this cool attachment towards the action and stuff. But I wanted to be in front of the camera, not behind it. That kind of thing. I
Mm.
wanted to be the guy kicking in
Right.
the door and all that kind of stuff. So,
Right.
so at some stage, I applied for Delta Force and ended up getting in, and then ended up progressing into a career as a recon guy over in that area.
Right on. And so what was that experience like in the day to day? We talked a little bit earlier about not talking about what was being experienced and unpacking the heavy situation of the reality of those day-to-day duties and the trauma that is kind of setting in with everyone. But tell us a little about both experience, and if you want to go into anything that you like individual experiences that really affected you, feel free to do
Yeah, I
so.
mean, it was like that unit is it's a very interesting place to work. You've
Mm.
got to be a certain type of mentality to even get in the door there, and then you've got to even be sort of an even different type of mentality to last.
Right.
And the operational tempo is just insane. It's always go go go. You're always on call. You're always flexed to do something. You're training to go somewhere. You're either gone. I mean, there was one year I was only home for 2 months out of the whole year between a deployment and all the trips that you end up doing in between that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just a constant go 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 type of place. In a very high stress environment. You're just constantly thinking about ways to solve problems,
Mm-hmm.
and so this constant mentality of being in a problem set, right?
Right.
That's what the unit did,
Mm.
was they kind of advertised themselves as the elite problem solvers. So psychologically, when you're in that mindset all the time,
Mm.
it becomes who you are, right? You become a person that's seeking out problems and solutions and all that kind of stuff. And this can carry over to any kind of, large corporation business, all that kind of stuff, where you see it in other facets where, not just the combat related stuff, whereas there are people in the industry and businesses and stuff like that they're living in this constant
Mm. Yeah.
cycle of finding problems and solving them, and so eventually, and in the arena that I was playing in, right, which is a lot of combat mixed in with all this other stuff, even when you're at home, that trains the mind to be in a constant fight or flight mode.
Right.
So the average human would maybe, I don't know, get in a car accident, and their stuff would elevate and go into sort of this survival mode.
Mm-hmm.
And then once everything was safe, it would kind of start going back down, and they'd become at their base level again.
Mm.
Whereas constant years of living the way we were living, that base level is elevated. And so train your mind to think that elevated state is the base level, and you are always in fight or flight, excuse me. So the psychological effects on that are lack of sleep, high anxiety, which leads to depression and this cycle of stuff. So it's not just a an event that would
Mm,
cause these things. Like a lot of people think PTSD is caused by, hey, you got shot or blown up, or your friends died, or whatever combat situation, which is equated to what normal civilians uh, think occurs. I mean,
yeah.
they get a lot of stuff out of the movies and all that sort of stuff. The movies, I think, glorify all that stuff in a very different way. The
Right.
reality is PTSD and all these other effects come from the constant state that you put your mind in.
Huh.
And I had a great guy. He was a senior guy at the unit for a long time. He came back for a talk and initially set up. He was one of the first guys, and he was one of the special ops guys back in Vietnam, and he was explaining PTSD in a kind of a good way that hit me. And he said they'd go out in these patrols in the jungle, and the PTSD didn't really come from going on the patrols or even getting shot at or being in a firefight and all that stuff. And I could really resonate with that because that was just kind of another day at the office.
Right.
Where it came from was the idea that you could step over a
Mm,
tripwire. So that
right.
was that every step of going was that, oh, take the step, And I remember relating to that in Iraq where I'd been blown up a few times, and there was a couple places where it was a common place to get blown up, and in the vehicles, and every time you kind of turn that corner, you'd have this cringy feeling in your stomach, like, oh, is this going to be another one? And it
Hmm.
was that constant thing every day, right? So building that up over years and years, this is kind of a long-winded way of explaining how PTSD developed, or at least how my perception of it developed in me, was that putting yourself in those constant situations in that frame of mind to develop a sort of higher state of anxiety that ends up being a natural state.
Right. Man, that's a fascinating take on PTSD. That's just connecting some dots on stuff of other people I've talked to. That it's not necessarily just that one event or a couple of big events that triggers it. It's just operating at like a level that's just way beyond and above what you normally like, just
Yeah,
normal
yeah, and
calm day to day.
I'm not saying a single event won't trigger sort of a massive PTSD event.
Right.
It's but a lot of times those are kind of like on my car wreck analogy, right?
Yep.
Or bring it into combat. If a person never really had to experience that high level of stress all the time, but they did go on a tour and they got blown up in their vehicle, and that really, it'll affect them
For sure.
100%.
For sure.
But do that all the time
Right.
for a couple decades,
Yeah.
and you're kind of left with a, I don't know what I guess the docs were kind of explaining to me as a permanent state of PTSD. Like the only way out of
Right.
it is out of the situation and out of the environment and everything like that. And then through, I don't know how many years of healing and da 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 and all sort of
Right.
stuff. And I think they were really scraping the ice. PTSD is a very kind of new problem set to
Conversation.
be
Yeah.
tackled. I mean, ever since, I mean, really, the last couple decades, really,
Right.
and is when people kind of started taking it serious. And in the last
Mhm.
decade, people were like, "Oh shit, this is a problem, and it's causing suicides and issues and all that
Right.
kind of stuff. So how do we tackle this?"
Right. When did you understand that you needed to like move towards your medical retirement?
Um, there was it was the last couple of years, the last kind of couple of years
I guess what were the
me being in.
symptoms?
Well, there was, I mean, there was an extremely hard deployment in Syria that I went through. I was going through an extremely hard time with my marriage, and all the kind of the blocks were adding up, and I noticed myself kind of going to work. I'm like, how much longer am I going to keep this up?
Hmm.
And I started looking at different avenues of different types of jobs, and like I could do this, all that. So those types of thoughts was like, huh, all right, I'm not in the game anymore.
Hmm.
I'm not in the game.
Right.
I'm not excited about deploying anymore. I'm not, it's just, and I started really noticing things like that. So that's when I started going down different avenues of, uh, of options. And And then my neck is, I've got severe degenerative disc disease in my neck,
Mm.
and it was really bugging me. Like I couldn't sleep and all that stuff. And so I went and saw one of the docs, and she was like, "Hey, this is some pretty bad stuff. You might want to consider a career change, like, or
Right.
how this might be, affecting you staying in the army type level of bad."
Right.
And I think a lot of people would look at that as bad news, but I was like, "Oh shit, this could be my ticket out. Like,
Right.
I won't have to look for a different career in the army. I could actually just retire. Like,
Hmm.
wow." So I really started investigating it and going to more appointments and all that stuff. And it turns out that I had a laundry list of shit that was wrong with me that was eligible for retirement. So I was like, you know
Right.
what? I'm tapping out, man.
Right. 15 years, right? Like I'm sure most people in the army as a combat vet after that amount of time have that laundry list. It's just about kind of when is the person ready to confront it and step outside of like what you said, um, that day to day and just acknowledging like, I'm not okay.
Yep. Yeah. No, it was the right time. It was just a lot of stuff going on in the army and in my personal life, uh, that it was like the universe basically saying, "Hey, buddy, like, you know, we keep knocking on your head and you
Mm,
keep ignoring us, but now it's time to listen. Like, start taking care of yourself."
right.
Because it was really getting to the point of I was drinking heavily. I was, you know I just knew stuff was extremely bad, and
Right.
and and I had a feeling that if I continued down that path, either I'd end up dead overseas
Hmm.
or I just end up killing myself. It was
Right.
just kind of going down that road. So yeah,
Yeah. And so you made the decision. I mean, I guess you made the decision to like set up all these appointments and kind of learn what was going on about yourself, right? To like move towards the
yeah.
medical retirement.
So
Whose
with
decision was it? Yours or?
well, ultimately it's my decision,
Yeah.
but with the way it works is you kind of have to uh, apply. I wouldn't say apply, but sort of set yourself up for a medical retirement.
Hmm.
So you do a series of medical appointments, just to verify and just so kind of I know and the docs know and all that stuff. And then you get to a point where you talk to the doc that'll make the decision.
Right.
And he reviews everything and he's like, yeah, this is all qualifying stuff. Like, do you want to do this?
Mm.
Is kind of what he says. And and once he blesses off on it, it goes into a different system now of uh, you know getting out of the army.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Man, I'm just connecting the dots on, not to compare like regular civilian life to a combat vet, but the potential collective PSD that human beings might be experiencing through the pandemic here. I'm just thinking to your analysis of that heightened stress response, day to day fight or flight, like in this world that we're now living in, where people are kind of, you never really know what's going to happen. Are we going to get locked down again? Like, is the world getting shut down? Can we travel? Uh, yeah, I didn't really think about that like that could be why so many people are suffering right now is like we're all in a bit of a state of fight or flight. So that was just like an interesting take to hear you talk about that. Your analysis of PTSD coming from living at a heightened state of stress in the fight or flight mode for too long is what can actually cause people to develop chronic anxiety, depression. And I'm just seeing some of that. I've had so many conversations with people, just normal civilians, of what they're going through in the pandemic, not being able to like see family, feeling like a lot
hmm
of their freedoms are being peeled away. A lot of people now too, like for whatever reason that their choice is to not get vaccinated, might have to change careers. So, and you just see a lot of people are really like struggling and suffering, and there might be a lot of PTSD right around the corner from this heightened
yeah.
stress
I mean,
response.
yeah, 100%, absolutely. It's a massively changing world because of all of this. People's lives have been uh, shifted into directions they couldn't even dream of, right? And you got your piling on lack of connection with people,
Hmm.
uh, lack of being with family members that you're normally used to being with, unsure of where your job's going to go. A lot of people getting laid off, you know, the financial struggles and everything like that. How a lot of people are losing their houses. I mean, just the intensity of stress is, I think at least beyond my imagination, considering that I think I got off pretty well during the whole pandemic. But just listening to other people, and I've got my parents living in Ireland, and hearing the different level of what they deal with it in Europe as opposed to sort of in the States. I mean, full fucking lockdown, man. I mean, you know, it's like, do not leave your house.
Yeah. And
And
military in the street.
yeah, I mean, it's almost like Gestapo style ruling, you know, and it's just, you know, so yeah, I mean, that's traumatic for a few months, but we're going into a few years now, right?
I know.
And this is, you know, so I mean, yes, there's been some eases, and people are kind of getting into the rhythm of things, but absolutely, 100% people, this is going to change people's mindset in a lot of different ways, you know. So I think globally, this could be a good shift for a different modality of healing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The opioid pandemic isn't
It's
going to
only
solve this
gotten
problem,
worse.
right?
No,
Yeah,
it's just gotten worse.
It's gotten worse, right?
Yeah.
And you know, you can't just stick a Band-Aid on things like this, right? This is it's a global catastrophe.
Yeah, yeah, and SSRIs and antidepressants and anti-anxieties,
Right.
they play their role, but they're not going to solve this big problem when we talk about this on a global scale, right? So we need something different. Um, cue the psychedelics, right?
Right.
So yeah, so you get out, you've got your medical retirement now, and what's life like in the first few months, like once you?
So I hadn't gotten out at this point.
Okay.
Getting out is a long process.
Right.
But I'd stopped working in a sense, right? So
Okay.
once you start that sort of medical retirement or any kind of retirement, you've got like a year or so of just getting your shit done. You
Right.
know, you got to prep for civilian life. You got to prep for this. You got to do all that stuff, and then you're kind of doing all your medical stuff. You're not working anymore.
Right.
So, which was really great for me because I needed the break anyway, and then two, it allowed me a lot of time to start figuring out myself. Um, I mean, the Army had me on a slew of different drugs, right? Like, hey, you've got depression, here's this. Well, that's giving you anxiety. Well, here's this. So you can't sleep. Oh, here's this. Da 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 da. Right.
They've
So I
all
had a
got their own
pharmacy.
side effects.
I know, man. It was a pharmacy of shit, and I hated it. I'm normally a very clear-headed, focused, like to be in control type person. I mean, obviously not when I'm downing a bottle of whiskey or doing whatever drugs, but
Right.
on a day-to-day basis, right?
Yeah.
I knew that it couldn't be like this. I didn't want to exist like this, and I also didn't want to exist with all the PTSD and all that stuff. And I'm like, is this permanent? Is this am I going to be like this for the rest of my life? I can't do this.
Right.
This isn't cool. I refuse to accept that I can't be better than this. Is kind of what it came down to. I'm willing to do whatever it takes and find whatever avenues. And so I really started investigating like neuroplasticity. I started meditating a lot, kind of getting into a more of a holistic type of stuff like yoga, changing the diet, training the brain to think differently. Dr. Joe Dispenza's got some great stuff on that, and a wonderful show called Rewired about how to rewire your brain. And it really starts with thought. Am I given the diagnosis that I have PTSD? Okay, shit, I've got PTSD. This is going to affect me now. How can I do this? All these kind of things start, and then you start accepting that as like, oh shit, I'm sick, I'm messed up. Now, can you start telling yourself, no, I'm not. I'm smarter than I was. This is giving me a better opportunity. I'm going to grow from this. People talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. Well, what about post-traumatic stress growth? Right. And so I started looking at it in that way. And as I was kind of reforming my thought process around the entire stuff, introduce psychedelics.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a good friend who I think he'd recently gone through an ayahuasca experience, and he was telling me, he was like, "Dude, you've got to do this. This is 100% something that you need to do."
Right.
Obviously, I couldn't just hop on a plane and
Head down to
head off
Peru.
to the jungle, right?
Yeah.
And it just wasn't available where I was, and so he started talking about other types of things like mushrooms, obviously, and then microdosing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd never heard of it, and so I started investigating all that stuff and figuring out ways to get it, and used my wonderful skills that the special operations had taught me, and
Right.
navigated my way through the dark web.
Right. And was this
So
microdosing psilocybin, LSD?
initially psilocybin and LSD.
Got it.
Yeah, I was going for
Was
both.
there no conversation about microdosing back in the 90s when you were in your Explorers Club?
Dude, didn't exist, man.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, just didn't
Yeah.
exist. I mean, I at least from the research that I've done recently over the last couple of years, it's a fairly new thing.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it started with some Silicon Valley guys,
Yeah,
just
that's what
wanting
I've
that
heard.
extra little bit of creativity edge.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't know, like somewhere around 2010-ish was the sort of the renaissance of psychedelics and microdosing levels, I guess. But
Right. Being used by like normal functioning human beings, and then some potentially very high level human beings that have built businesses that have completely changed the way the world operates.
absolutely, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Which is a wild concept, right? Like Jack Dorsey the other day, I saw him talking about like his use of LSD and microdosing. And you're like,
Mhm.
man, this guy's he's the CEO right now of Twitter and Square. So,
Right.
like two things that have fundamentally changed the way the world operates, right? Changed the way we
Absolutely,
communicate,
and you've got Steve Jobs as well, who was
right?
a big proponent of psychedelics.
Yeah.
You've got Tim Ferriss, who's a
Oh yeah.
huge proponent of it too. I mean, you got all these huge names, and I think the combination of these big time names, along with science getting their doors opened back up to it. Now I say getting it open because it was closed for them. It wasn't the scientists that wanted to stop doing it. It was the government intervening in the stupid war on drugs and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So over the last sort of decade to 15 years, a lot of the red tape's been lifted, and so you're now having these valid scientific experiments and verifications and whatnot, lifting the stigma.
Mm.
Mushrooms aren't going to fry your brain; they actually help your brain, type of
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And so I think constantly we're getting proven these days that this stuff is actually a medicine, if used correctly in the right environments with the right people. And so yeah, naturally the stigma is starting to get lifted.
Mm-hmm.
It's becoming more of a household name of, hey, are you going to head down and help yourself in an ayahuasca retreat, instead of like, oh, dude, what the hell are you doing? You're going to
Right.
kill yourself, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Going to do drugs in the jungle.
Exactly, right. Yeah, and you just kind of bringing it back to my reintegration into psychedelics.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it started. Really was kind of getting introduced by my friend again to this stuff, and then finding a way to get it, and then really researching very meticulously. Like I was going down to the dose, so I was growing my own at one stage,
Yeah.
and I wanted to have a very scientific, measured effect on how to approach this. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm just going to grab a handful and see where that does. I'm like, okay, let's measure out exactly what this dose does, and then mentally record. Sometimes I take notes as well about what effect that has, and then go down to tolerance as well, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if I did on the microdosing side, right, if I was doing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, then I would take Thursday, Friday off just to reset, and then Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and kind of give myself a bit of a schedule. Experimenting with different levels of dosages, right? So a microdose can be anywhere from 0.1 to 0.5 grams is generally with the accepted amount.
Mm-hmm.
Supposed to be a sub
Perceptual, yeah.
uh, sub-perceptual, sub-psychedelic type of
Hmm.
experience with the psilocybin or whatever you're using to be able to have those effects without you noticing it, right? So you can take a sub-psychedelic level, and those neural pathways are still going to start opening up,
Right.
and the effects uh, still work without you tripping, pretty much, right?
Right.
Now, I would like to, I, I still do like to kind of keep it at that threshold where I just feel it.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, Still operate fine. You can work, you can go to the gym, you can drive your car, you do whatever, and
Right.
but you just have this, oh, okay, I can feel it working type
Yeah.
stuff.
A little heightened sense of awareness.
Yeah, a little heightened sense of awareness, and I think a lot of that slight heightened sense of awareness also helps you on a day to day with
Mm.
interacting with people and appreciating, you know, things in a different light. Um, where I was normally a little bit more closed off, I would be more open to conversations and more sympathetic towards situations and
Mm.
stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah,
How?
so I think over the course of, and I couldn't give you a time frame, but I mean it was months um, that it really started changing things.
Mm.
I was very open to about it with my family, my kids, my wife at the time, my parents, sister, everyone. You know, I kind of brought everyone into the fold, saying this is what I'm doing to fix myself.
Right.
And so it really kind of hit home one day. I asked my daughter, I think she was probably 17 at the time or something, and I was like, "Hey, are you okay with this? With me kind of doing all this, you know, these mushrooms and all that kind of stuff?" She was like, "Oh yeah, you're way more chill these days."
Ah, that's awesome.
So like having her kind of blessing was like, okay, I'm definitely on the right track if I'm making my daughter happy, right? So
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah,
um,
no shame or judgment there, just you're a better
no,
person.
you know, yeah,
So keep
and I
doing what you're
think
doing.
exactly, and I was doing it in a very honest and open way, with the intent of healing, right? It wasn't
Mm.
just like, oh, bro, I found some new cool shit, and I'm gonna get involved in it. So, and I felt good about educating them as well in a way that helped lift the stigma, right? I've always been a
Right.
huge fan of psychedelics, and to be able to uh, educate my kids at a young age that you know these are actually healing modalities. Uh, they're not things to be mess around with, even though I did. But
Yeah.
we,
Well,
you
that's
know,
we talked about that earlier. It's kind of the way you start out with anything in life, right? Like there's a curiosity, but the younger human being isn't necessarily too concerned about mental health and growth. You just want to try everything. And a lot of
hmm
it's based around let's just have fun. Like let's get fucked up and see what happens, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
then they shift to a different meaning. You're talking, I loved your analogy earlier, like the garbage bags of life start to pile up, right? You need something to help you kind of like clear through the bullshit and like
right.
move stuff out of the way, which isn't necessarily the case when you're younger, right? Everything's just
Yeah,
so
I mean,
new.
exactly. You know, I think at a younger age, you're still looking at the world with fascination anyway, right?
Right,
Everything's
right.
still kind of very new, and throw in a few psychedelics, and now you're like, whew, wow, and you can really kind of see things. It's a fun trip. Most of the
Right.
time, when you're younger, it's a fun trip,
Right.
and yeah, exactly. You get a little older, and there's a little bit more stuff to sift through.
Yeah, yeah. So, you started doing your microdosing. That was working, but you couldn't get down for this ayahuasca experience, right? So, there's a part of your story there where you decided to take a different route from going and doing
Right.
like the ayahuasca ceremony.
Yeah, so along with the microdosing, I was also deep diving into the mushrooms and the LSD. I had some MDMA as well, just to kind of, you know, I was going on down every road just to see what how it could fix me.
Right.
And so, yeah, I would go into some of the deep dives. I think at one point I did, the highest amount I did was probably, 10 or 12 grams of mushrooms,
Hmm.
which isn't like I've heard of people doing copious amounts, but it's still considered a hero. And so on higher doses like that, I started learning that a different level of healing is really understanding that the ego, which is this program that brings us through life, is responsible for every single problem and every single solution. And in order to truly understand that, you need to separate yourself from the ego. And I think some people would argue, well, the self is the ego. Well, you use psychedelics and you kind of understand that there's an observer, there's a separate entity, if you want to call it that. And I don't want to get kind of weird with some of the listeners out there that might not go down this realm, but it's a different type of thing. And so when you get to those deeper levels, you really truly have an understanding of this separatedness of what we create, and understanding that it's actually a unified thing. And so you come out of those experiences and you start understanding, you're like, shit, all this stuff that I piled up, this depression, these problems, this crap, was all created by me.
Right.
And I can undo it. Right. And that's the level. I think when people get so deep in this depression hole of crap and all that stuff, it's easy to throw the blame outwards, right? It's like, oh, if that person did this, I wouldn't be here, or and all that stuff. Whereas you really start taking ownership in everything, and absolutely everything. The only things that happen in life are the things that happen, and the event, right? And then it's the individual that takes the perception of that event and creates a story around it. And so, something that might happen to you and I, a pen dropping on a table and you're sitting on the other side, right? You say the pen dropped on the table. And I said, well, someone dropped a pen on the table, or whatever the perception, we're going to see it in completely different ways. At the end of the day, what happened. Right. And so you start understanding that all your problems and everything that relate to the issues that you want to heal come back down to you. And so I really kind of started investigating that a lot more with these deep dives, and really, really liking it. Like, it was cool. I'm going down a rabbit hole that is scientifically and spiritually very, very entertaining, curious, amazing.
So when you say deep dive, are you referring to like just meditating on this like newfound philosophy that you had of like radical responsibility?
No, when I say deep dive, I mean taking a higher dose.
Yeah.
Sorry, I should have clarified that.
That's
better.
okay.
Yeah, so a higher dose, right? So if I'm doing a microdose of LSD, a higher dose might be a few tabs.
Right. Yeah.
And then just sitting with yourself, right? So a lot of times I'd either be up in my room with an eye mask with some music on and really, really going internally, or I'd sit outside and meditate into it, just making sure that I was alone. A deep dive is sort of using a larger amount of psychedelics to go deeper within yourself.
Right. And doing that preparation work, right, that you were talking about, of setting that intention of let's take radical responsibility. So were you just kind of like sitting in that quiet observation of your past experiences while on the psychedelics to just
No, it doesn't really, at least for me, it didn't come up. The past experiences didn't really come up. It was just, the way at least psychedelics work for me is I don't get a wash of past experiences. Right. I get what the medicine kind of shows you, an analogy in a different dimension, right? And so it's up to you to be able to interpret that language, if you want to call it that. So something that might be very difficult, like people would call a bad trip a bad time. Right. I would call a bad trip a very hard lesson.
Yep, that's a great
right. So it's the medicine's way of showing you something that you need to work on and work through. And from personal experience, the only way, out of the fear, out of the pain, out of the depression is through it. Absolutely. And psychedelics present an extremely cool way to go through it. And it's very
Right.
difficult.
Hmm.
I don't think, we've all heard of people having a bad trip, and I don't think anyone's really heard of a person that enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work, right?
Right.
Um,
Like a really challenging therapy session, right?
it is
Like,
a very, very challenging therapy session with
yeah.
yourself, right?
Yes.
You being the therapist and the patient.
Mm. Yeah.
And um, so yeah, that's that. And I just became, I became very, um, uh, just amazed at the process
Hmm.
of kind of going deeper, and then seeing where this would take. And all this is kind of new stuff, right? Even the doctors and the scientists are still trying to figure all this stuff out. There's no regime of microdosing. There's no,
Hmm.
how much do you take in order for you to feel better after on a deeper dose? And everyone's
Right.
still trying to figure it out, right? So I'll be my own guinea pig and just kind of figure things out. And so, like, having a regime of microdosing, and then maybe on Saturday do a deep dive,
Right.
and then take a little bit of a break for a while. Let that digest,
Hmm.
integrate yourself into that experience and in your life, and then sort of on your days off, you're not really taking a break, but you're now that experience is now giving you the opportunity to go a little deeper with your meditation.
Right.
And so where you might have been stuck on meditation before, the thoughts are creeping in, you can't really get past the breath and all that stuff.
Mm.
Now you're in a space of no thought,
Wow.
and this sort of realm of emptiness, eternity, through just meditation, right? And so the package, so to speak, right? You've got this neuroplasticity package of how to heal yourself. It starts becoming a lot more clear, right? So now you've got your psychedelics in the mix, you've
Hmm.
got your meditation, your yoga, your diet, your thought process. Wake up in the morning saying today's going to be an awesome day.
Hmm.
Things always work out for me, instead of, God damn
Right.
it, what the fuck do I have to do today? Oh shit,
Yeah.
I've got to
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
this done, and all. So just changing that mindset,
Mm.
along with everything else, is this kind of recipe into becoming a new human, creating a
Right.
new you, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I got to the point of these deep dives where I was really getting curious about consciousness and the
Mm.
universe, and like, wow, this isn't it.
Right.
And so that really drove me to kind of, I'm like, there's got to be something more. Like that, I know that there's another thing out there that'll get me to a different level. And it sounds like a fucking drug guy chasing the next biggest high and stuff, but
Yeah.
it really, I mean, yes, maybe that it was a little bit of that, but it was uh, with a very kind of cool intention.
Yeah. Were you kind of like with your deeper dives, were you starting to see that there was like a little glimpse behind the curtain that there was something else there?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I was getting into realms of things that, like, obviously I wasn't in this dimension anymore type
Right.
stuff.
Right.
You know, um,
What was there a sense that you would just kind of like, because you said like, oh, there's more, right? So knowing that there's more to me would dictate that like you've kind of just had that glimpse and like scratched the surface on something. So was that?
so it was like, let's try to use this analogy
Mhm.
for dimensions. Okay.
Okay.
So it would be, um, it would be impossible for a two-dimensional creature to be able to understand what a three-dimensional object is.
Right.
And if a three-dimensional object were to pass through a two-dimensional space, like a sphere,
Hmm.
that creature would see a dot, and then the dot would turn into a line, get wider, and then eventually shorter, back into a dot and disappear.
Hmm.
They wouldn't actually see a sphere. Um, it's the same kind of concept with us on a higher dimension, right?
Hmm.
Our brain isn't programmed to be able to view a higher dimension,
Right.
whereas our consciousness is an interdimensional type of energy. And
Wow.
so it would be like opening up a window to that two-dimensional creature and then
Mm,
looking in saying, oh, there's other things out there that
right.
don't resemble us, but I can't really make them out.
Huh.
There's something else out there.
Right.
And so that's kind of where I was with this, is like I'm stepping into this realm where it was kind of like a window of like I was seeing it, I was kind of there, but I wasn't part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going beyond the five senses that we know in the third
Right.
dimension that
Yeah.
we
And
live
and
in.
and even beyond the sort of sense of thought, if you want to
Mm,
call that a sense, but you're leaving that egoistic type of mindset
right.
and becoming an observer,
Mm,
right? That observer of thoughts, right? The I mean, people have a lot of different names for it over history, but some people might call it a soul. Some people
right.
might call it the spirit. Some people might call it consciousness. Some people might call it energy. Some people might call it a lot of different things, right?
Right.
Um, I choose to use the word consciousness because that's just the road that I'm taking.
Right.
Um,
That's your way of making some sense or relation to it all.
right,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
and maybe as I go down this path, I'll learn that it might be something completely different.
Right. Right.
Who knows, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's all just labels at the end of the day, right? Of
exactly right.
words that we've
Yeah.
learned in the this dimension. Yeah. So now we're talking about your DMT experience, right? Like this
Yeah,
is
so now enter DMT, right?
yeah.
So
You
I
couldn't do ayahuasca and the active psychedelic hallucinogen compound in ayahuasca is DMT.
right.
What is it? Dimethyl. What's the
Yeah, well, it's NN-DMT,
okay?
and so there's a few different types of DMT out there, and the most popular one that everyone kind of knows about is NN-DMT, dimethyltryptamine,
Dimethyltryptamine. Okay.
um, and it's found naturally in the human body.
Mm-hmm.
We endogenously produce it. It's found in a copious amount of plants all over the world,
Mm-hmm.
um, to include the caapi plant and the ayahuasca vine. The ayahuasca vine is an actual different component uh, that helps the body ingest it orally.
Right.
But the actual NMDMT is in the caapi vine or other types of, or the, sorry, leaf.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also found in acacia bark,
Okay.
um, in different parts of the world. And I mean, this could go on to a different conversation of
Yeah.
where different cultures around the world historically have found
Mm-hmm.
God or different levels of exploration. I mean,
Right.
the stuff's everywhere.
Right. But you were able to get your hands on some and smoke it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the pretty much the traditional way of ingesting NMDMT is to smoke it.
Right.
And yeah, I'd naturally I've done all my research and really investigated the stuff, um, and it's kind of a tricky thing to smoke. Like it's not something you just pack in a bowl and smoke. It's
Right.
you've got to have the right temperature. You really have to, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Vaporize it
Okay.
instead of burn it. Like if you burn it, you get a different effect sometimes. Um, so I had to go through a little growing pains trying to figure out the
Right.
best way to do this stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and finally I was like, you know what, let me just throw down for a proper kind of vaporizing pipe that everyone on kind of the internet was saying, if you're going to do DMT, do it with this stuff here.
Right.
So I ended up getting the right equipment and kind of dabbled in it a little bit. And I was like, let me test the waters here and see what I'm getting involved in. And I mean, it just blew my mind right away. I was like, Jesus, dude, if this is just me testing the waters, holy fuck, what am I
Yeah.
about to get involved in?
Right.
I mean, this is for anyone that's kind of experienced any kind of psychedelic on a mushroom LSD level, you kind of understand that hallucinations, for the most part, just kind of are there, right? Like things
Mm-hmm.
will move, the ground moves, the trees
Right.
move, and all that kind of stuff. Whereas this stuff, um, the entire where everything around you completely changes. Like it is, everything completely turns into fractal type stuff. It's just the most intense hallucinations you'll ever experience, and that's on a lower level, right?
Right.
So once I'm feeling a little more comfortable, I'm like, okay, let me go ahead and do a deeper dive, and so I did sort of my first big one, and it was pretty intense. It was crazy. I was in this completely different world,
Hmm.
and I loved it. It was amazing. I had no idea that anything like that could exist,
Hmm.
and just blew my mind. And I let that go for a few days, probably about a week or something. I don't know. And then I'm like, I really feel like I could go deeper, but I don't want to really rock the boat too much
Right.
without it really resonating with me the way it should resonate, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of experienced people will tell you when things on that level, that spirit, that type of thing, when it feels like it's ready for you to resonate with it, it'll call you.
Right.
And it's not one of these things you seek out, right? And
Hmm.
it's just kind of when it's ready, it'll give you a little sign.
Mm.
So I was lying in bed one night, and um, I think I was watching a documentary on some psychedelic thing of shaman or something like that,
Yeah.
and then I started reading a little bit about it and stuff, and then I was like, damn, is that something clicked, and
Mm.
I was like, oh, 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 I think now's the time.
Mm.
Let's go ahead and do this, right? And so I had it next to me, and instead of measuring out a dose, which I'd normally do, I was
Hmm.
like, I'm just going to go ahead and pour in what I think is appropriate.
Wow. Just like at that
And
time, you're watching the documentary and you were like, this is the
this is the
time.
time. This is it. Yeah, I didn't even
Were you
finish
by
the
your,
documentary. Just hit pause. Yeah, I was by myself up in my
wow.
bedroom,
Wow.
and yeah, and I poured in what I thought was appropriate,
Mm.
and then let her rip. And um, yeah, it definitely blasted me off, man. It was it was that like if other psychedelics show you how this world can change
Mm.
through whatever experiences, uh, the different thoughts, the hallucinations, and all that stuff, they kind of change this world.
Right.
Whereas DMT straps you to a nuclear rocket that blasts you into a different dimension while you're holding on for dear life on the outside, thinking, what the fuck is going on? This
Wow.
entire world completely sheds, and you're in a different dimension. And so for the first while, you're trying to soak it all in. Like it comes on very, very fast. I mean, the actual effect maybe take a few seconds, but
Mm.
when your peak is just blasted up into a completely different, you know, who knows. And so you're
Right.
there just now soaking. It's like now that two-dimensional creature has been blasted up into the third dimension, and they're like, "What the fuck is this?"
Right.
There's shapes that actually have dimension and stuff, and so now you're in this whatever it is experiencing, holy shit, what have I just done?
Right.
And
And a loss of
um
the senses too, I think is what you
oh,
described, right?
complete
Like
loss of this. Yeah,
360 degree, not vision, but like awareness. Like you could see or have
everything.
an awareness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of
Very,
yeah. And I mean, like, time ceased to exist. There was no time, so to speak. It was just all of time.
right. Hmm.
And there was no here or there. It was everywhere. And
Hmm.
it's kind of hard. There is no earth language to be able to describe that
Right.
experience. So any kind of
Yeah, I'm the
any kind of
two-dimensional
explanation,
creature, right? And
yeah,
you're the three-dimensional being trying to
right.
explain. I
So
get
it's
it. Yeah.
just you're using bits and pieces just to try to entice the imagination into something, but
Right.
the justification just isn't there.
Hmm.
um so yeah, a very, very profound initial experience, and then um I found myself standing next to my bed.
Mm.
I didn't know how I got there. I was just kind of standing there, and And I'm like, what the fuck is going? I'm like, Jesus Christ. I'm like, and
So
I'm and then I'm hearing all these voices.
did you have an
They're not.
awareness that you were in your room at this
Oh,
point?
100%. Like now I was awake. I was
Okay.
awake and standing. I was conscious in my
Mm.
mind, staring at my bed and my desk and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, what, dude, what is going on? And I was like, wow, I had immense appreciation for what I just gone through. I was like,
Hmm.
dude,
Hmm.
I have just been shown the answer to the entire universe, like from multiverse type stuff. Like it was the beginning and end of all time. It was everything all in one, and it was miraculous.
Mm.
And I'm standing there like trying to just grasp what I've just been through, and I'm hearing these voices like saying, "Congratulations, you've made it. This is it. You've made it." And I'm like, and I'm not hearing them through my ears. They're kind of in my head and stuff. And
Right.
and then I look up and there's this sort of shrine of people, beings, I guess. They're these sort of enshrined in little sort of Hindu temple type little
Mm.
looking things. There were 7 of them, I think 7, and they were glowing this sort of yellow type of. Uh, I would like to say a human shaped type thing, but sitting down like cross-legged type thing.
Mm.
And they had these huge, big blue hands, just clapping. And then these other voices. I don't know if the voices sounded like they were coming from the left, and these things were to my front. So I don't know if it was all connected or not. And so I'm like, congratulations. Like, what? What do you mean? What's here? Where have I arrived? They're like, well, and then it kind of started to dawn on me. I'm like, have I just died?
Mm.
And then they were like, yes. And I was like, what? No, 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 no. And then it really
Right.
started, and then my eyes kind of narrowed down to the pipe. And I was like, oh my fucking God, I've just killed myself. I took too much DMT.
Right.
I didn't measure it out. I just poured in a bunch, and
Mm.
I have just fucking killed myself. And then I was perceiving the room as, this is the room that they bring me to kind of let me off easy before I step
Ah.
outside, and I walk to wherever I walk to, or go to wherever I go to, or wherever, right? So I'm thinking this is kind of like the little, hey
Oh,
buddy,
yeah, the
we've got
the
some bad news for
transition
you.
room. Oh man.
So I'm freaking the fuck out. I'm
Yeah.
I'm just I'm physically crying. I'm just, I don't know what the hell, all that stuff. And I get to this point of like non-acceptance,
Mm.
and then all of a sudden I'm back in this realm of where I was before, of like the entire universe, no time, and da da
Right.
da, all that stuff.
Did you get
Experiencing this.
rocketed back out again? Because that's what I've heard is it's like it's kind of like a up down
Yeah,
experience.
pretty much. I guess so. Yeah, it was
Right.
just this. I was kind of back, and I was like, and I knew I was back in my bed, but I don't know how I got there. And then
Mm.
then I was back standing up again next to my bed, and I was again mind blown. But it was like it was the first time. So it
Huh.
was like I'd gone through a time loop, and now I'm experiencing all over again with the
Whoa.
slight memory that I'd been here before. And I go through the same process. Congratulations, you've made it. Beings, da da da. Oh shit, have I died? Yes. Oh my fucking God, what have I done? Da, da, da. And then I get rocketed back again and again, and it happens for eternity, for all of eternity.
What?
I'm going and doing that over and over and over again, and it was fucking mind blowing. But the only thing that brought me out of it was my cat scratching at the door, and I realized the damn cat had been in the room the whole time, or a little
Huh.
kitten, and it was now scratching at the door to get out. And I walk over and I look
Get
and
me
I'm
away from
like,
this lunatic.
and then yeah, and then no, then I was like, oh my God, oh my God, my cat just saved me from this eternal time loop,
Wow.
because this didn't happen in any of the other ones.
Mm.
So then I realized, oh shit, dude, I'm still on this thing, and it's going around. I'm like, what? I just couldn't make sense of it. It was the
Mm.
most intense thing. So I grabbed my cat and I'm like, oh, thank you so much for saving me from this crazy fucking eternal time loop that I've been experiencing. we go back to the bed, and I'm petting it, and I'm still very much in DMT world, but I'm
Mm.
acknowledging, this world. And then I start calming down, and I start to remember, you know what? I came here for healing.
Mm.
I came here for healing. So let's just get my shit together and start focusing on that. So I laid back down, started taking some deep breaths, meditating into it. And then I just started acknowledging kind of the spirit of the medicine, saying, hey, I apologized for taking advantage of something that I didn't really know what I was getting my hands in.
Mm.
Um, I showed gratitude for what they were showing me, and just kind of really had a conversation with this thing that I was experiencing. And then once I was sort of calm and collected and gathered my thoughts, I said, okay, I've come here for healing, and I had my eyes closed. Point. What did I have my? No, that I didn't. At that point, I was kind of looking up the ceiling, and the entire ceiling opened up into
Mm.
this black darkness realm, and I could sense these beings kind of looking down over me. And then things started coming down into me, into the top of my head, and I started feeling this insane sizzling energy in my head, um, and and it started working its way down into my neck, my shoulders, and then my entire body was just the most insane electrical buzzing. And and then I started floating out, like obviously not my physical body, but like
Mm-hmm.
whatever started floating out, and I started going somewhere. And then after that, I don't remember anything. I remember waking up in my bed, or
Hmm.
not waking up, but like being back in my bed, and I was like feeling extremely refreshed.
Hmm.
Like just kind of everything was just clear and
Yeah.
fluid, and just I just felt wonderful. And so I kind of gathered at that point that the experience was really coming to an end.
Hmm.
And I wanted to start writing things down. So I grabbed my computer, started taking notes, and realized that an hour and 50 minutes had passed for
Wow.
my experience, which I knew was completely unusual,
That's a
given the
long
fact that, yeah,
DMT trip.
normal DMT's trips are, between 15 minutes and half an hour type thing,
Mm.
with some residual after effects. But to be in it for that long, I don't know. I still can't explain it.
Yeah.
It could have been. I would equate it back to, because I've had quite a few other DMT experiences since, and none have lasted that long. But
Mm.
I was tapering off of some antidepressant drugs, which were
Okay.
SSRIs back then, which typically you're not really supposed to be mixing SSRIs with any kind of psychedelic, especially DMT, ayahuasca, all that kind of stuff. So
Mm.
yeah, I was teetering on the side of stupidity when it in hindsight, but
Right.
um, so I would equate it maybe to that. I don't know,
Mm.
but yeah. So I started writing things down. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I was too kind of enlightened, I guess, so to speak.
Right. And the one big thing that I think is important to talk about is you talked about it a little bit earlier in the conversation, the like your debilitating neck and back pain that you were experiencing, right? And the
Yeah,
experience of that when you came out. What was that like?
yeah. So the next morning, I actually had to go drive my daughter to a parade. She was in the marching band for the parade, for the Veterans Day parade, actually.
Mm.
And so I dropped her off early, and I was just hanging out for the parade to start, um, and I was on my phone just researching, like, what have I just been through? This is, I mean, I feel like I'm an enlightened being right now. This is the most profound experience I've ever had in my life. Um, and so I'm kind of researching stuff, and come across the whole healing side of things in one of the articles, and I was like, oh, that's right. I remember the whole healing portion of last night. And I
Right.
start moving my neck around, and I didn't have very good mobility at all
Mm.
prior to that. My shoulder, I couldn't lift up past a certain amount of degrees without pretty bad pain. And I had 100% mobility now. I was just with no pain, moving
Wow.
everything around, and it was just it felt like a brand new shoulder, neck, all that kind of stuff. And I was like, Oh my
Hmm.
God, no way. This, maybe it's just sort of residual effects the day after, who knows? But it lasted, and it still has lasted. I mean, it's come back. I don't, I still have a little bit of pain. I don't know, maybe about 4 or 6 months afterwards is when a little bit of the pain started coming back. But
Nothing
even
like you
then,
experienced before.
nothing like before. Yeah, like I was definitely hurting a lot before, and I mean to the point where it got me out of the army. Right? It was
Right.
very 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 painful.
And
Um,
was and did like I can't remember if I asked you this before in our earlier conversation, but did that come from an actual significant injury, or are we maybe linking
the
something to
so
like,
the shoulder one came from a firefight in Iraq where I lodged it between some rebar on when I was climbing over a trying to jump down off of a wall
right,
and just yanked it in a certain way, and then over the course of the years it was one of those injuries that just keeps on giving, right?
right,
And
but
so and then the neck one was it wasn't a specific one. I think it was just a series of different jumps and heavy equipment and
yeah,
putting it in shitty positions and all that kind of stuff.
yeah,
So
but you were diagnosed with a degenerative disc disorder, right?
yeah,
And so, have you had a diagnosis on that recently, or had
so
it
I
looked at?
haven't, right? That's a good question, man.
I'm like, man, go get a CAT scan.
I
What's going on in
I
there?
thought it would be really cool to go back then and say, hey, can I get another sort of, you know, X-ray, CAT scan, or whatever they'd give me
Yeah.
just to see what the difference is. But I was still going through the process
Mm,
of the medical retirement, so I didn't want anything to mess up
right.
my
Right. Right. Right.
my stuff. Right? They're like, oh, hold on a second, you don't have any problem right now, so you're good to stay in. Sorry, denied.
Yeah. Yeah.
So no, I left it. I just left it, and I still have thought about. I'm like, well, would it be worth going in to see if there's a difference?
Yeah,
Um,
man. I want to see that. I want to see
yeah,
some, I 100% believe you that, like your experience now is completely changed and that's incredible. And to just see, like, maybe, I don't know, like, let's check out that CAT scan. Let's see what's
it would be
there.
cool. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it would definitely be cool. I would have. I
Right.
mean, I think like there's some stuff I can feel it that's been built up over the last kind of
Yeah.
well since I've done it. So, but yeah, man,
It's fascinating.
to have had the opportunity to go get one right after, and just like, I truly believe that it was cured to the point where it wasn't debilitating anymore. You know, so yeah, to
Right.
have a
Right.
visual representation of that would have been cool.
No kidding. Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that's amazing. Yeah. It makes you, it's it's an interesting, fascinating concept to think about the like psychological or how our psychological issues manifest in physical ailments and pains and degenerative
Hmm.
diseases, right? You talk about being at like a heightened state of fight or flight for 15 years. And what does that do to the body above and beyond like the day-to-day stress on your physical body? But what does that heightened state do to the physical body
Oh
of
yeah,
too
hundred
much
percent,
cortisol
man.
for too
Yep.
long, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
100%. And that, I mean, it kind of goes
Mm,
back to what Joe Dispenza has been saying about, you know, like we all know we can think ourselves sick. It's a common
mm-hmm.
knowledge, right? Oh, you stop thinking like that, you're going to think yourself sick, right? But we don't really think about the fact that you can think yourself well.
Right.
And a really cool physical representation of that was an experiment that a doctor from Japan, Masaru Emoto, um,
I'll write that down.
EMOTO. Uh, he conducted um, this water experiment. If you Google water experiment Masaru Emoto, he
Sweet.
comes up with some pretty cool stuff. So his thing was he got uh, constructed a device that was able to photograph water crystals as they were in the process of freezing. So going from water to sort of crystal form,
Hmm.
and in the process of it, he would uh, he would emit emotions to it, right? So in whatever specific type of experiment, he would have love, and he
Hmm.
would express love and all that stuff. And another one, he would express hate, and another one, he expressed anger, and another one, he expressed gratitude, and even to the point where he got different types of music and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so in each one, different crystals would form, right? So in the love experiment, this beautiful snowflake type crystal would form repetitively, right? So it wasn't just a one time off, it was a repetitive, this is what love looks like. And this is what hate looks like, which was this ugly type of glob.
Mm.
And so you can actually do the experiment yourself by getting 2 jars of cooked white rice
Mm-hmm.
in water. Label one as love, label one as hate, and have them a little bit separate from each other. And every day you go up
Mm-hmm.
to it and you say, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, oh, I hate you. And then you go up to the other one and you say, I love you, and all that stuff. And it sounds ridiculous and it feels a little bit ridiculous when you're doing it. But when you kind of get into it, it becomes like a morning ritual, and it's
Right.
kind of fun to get the family involved. So over the course of, I don't know, about a month or something, you'll start noticing a significant change.
Mm-hmm.
And in the hate, you'll start seeing a lot of mold and shitty discoloring and just crap. And
Mm-hmm.
in the love, it'll just be crystal clear.
Yeah.
And
My
so,
friend Mark actually did this at his place a few years
oh, okay,
back.
great, you've heard
And
of it.
yeah,
Nice.
I didn't know the Masera Emoto water experiment, but we did it, and I remember going over his house like every few weeks, and you would see like black mold forming on the
Yeah,
hate. It was mind blowing. So
yeah.
I
So it
highly
really,
recommend that everybody tries
100%.
that.
Yeah, it is such a cool thing, and it's a wonderful way if you've got kids to get them involved in a cool experiment that
Hmm.
shows them the effect of emotion,
Right.
the physical effect of emotion, because we're
What a
around
lesson.
80% water, right?
Hmm.
And so your self-talk is directly affecting your physical being.
Yeah.
And so, you can tell a healthy person is a person that loves themselves, right?
Right.
It's
Right.
that kind of thing. You can just look at a person, they have this glow about them. Wow,
Yeah.
dude, you work out? Yeah, I work out, but I also love myself too, right? And so, and
Yeah.
then you can tell an unhealthy person, a person that's just
Mm.
miserable, right? And so it comes from within.
Mm.
And so it's a wonderful, wonderful experiment to really physically see what that self-talk is. And I can't remember why we ended up on this subject of the
Huh?
water experiment, and it was something to do with thought.
Yeah, well, I think just the physical manifestation of psychological
That's
issues,
right. We were talking
right?
about my injuries and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, yeah. So I think I'd kind of catapulted myself into whatever level of sort of healing into that, you know, degree,
Yeah.
but on a sort of a lower this dimensional type of degree. Yeah, 100% thought and emotion have a huge play
Massive impact.
on a massive impact on physical and emotional type of healing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
You know,
that's
and
so
and
true.
psychedelics really teach you that in a way where you don't have to blast yourself off into DMT
Hmm.
space, but on the lower levels, you really have an understanding of how thought can dictate your trip,
Hmm.
right? So you start thinking negative thoughts, you're going to have a bad trip.
Right.
How do you get out of a bad trip? Start thinking positive thoughts. And
Yeah.
so that equates, psychedelics are a teacher, and they
Hmm.
just they teach you things in a classroom that you're not normally used to listening to. A lot of times we like a very distinct, hey, 1 + 1 = 2.
Hmm.
Whereas in psychedelics they might say plant plus emotion equals love, right? And so like
Yeah.
it's a different type of teacher and classroom. And once you start to understand um, their modality of teaching, it's a wonderful way to be able to transform or transfer that into normal everyday life, right?
Yeah.
So I'm having a shitty day. Why are you having a shitty day? Well, I've been thinking shitty thoughts.
Most of the
Okay,
time, that's the case,
right?
right? Or there's things happening, like you touched on earlier, where we have a negative perspective or a negative light. That person dropped the pen on the table and threw it at me and made a noise. It's like, well, a pen just fell out of that person's hand, right?
Right.
Like that perception that we have to our daily experiences is what causes most of our suffering.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I love what you said too in your article that psychedelics are just a powerful guide to like help you do the proper work, right? They're not the magic button.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
And none of this stuff. There is no magic button, man.
Yeah. It's all work.
It is, and you could be, the most wonderful meditator in the world, and that's still not. It's one piece of the equation. It's sort of, and I think that's what I've been kind of building on over the last few years is this recipe of success.
Right.
And it can equate to everybody. It's just not. This is stuff that's worked for me, but I believe that the combination of meditation, yoga, diet, exercise, monitoring your thought process and everything like that, psychedelics as the teacher to help you along the way. There's probably a few others. What your diet doesn't only include what you eat. It also includes who you surround yourself with, what you're reading, what you're watching, your social media intake, all that kind of stuff. I've never been a social media guy, but I really started getting involved with Instagram during this whole process, and I tailored my Instagram page to be only things that were going to help me along the way, right? So things about consciousness, things about meditation, things about psychedelics, and so it became my life, right? And I just stopped following all the bullshit.
Awesome.
And so the whole kind of package, the recipe, it's a work, right? This is now it becomes your life, and yes, no magic button here, but an acceptance of this is the way now.
Yeah, a conscious daily process of doing the right work and controlling your inputs, right? Like that's so massive. Well, this has been a very, very enlightening conversation, man.
Cool,
I love the way that you operate in life. You have a fascinating story, and you've been through some heavy shit, and like you're a better person because
cool,
of it,
man. No, I appreciate it. I love talking about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Any opportunity that I can talk about
Yeah, very passionate.
cool stuff like this
good,
is a good day. So I really appreciate you bringing me on board.
I hope you write some more stuff like that. That's a great little article that you wrote under what's your alias?
Asher Gibson. Yeah.
Asher Gibson, which you can now probably write under your own
exactly.
name.
I had to use the alias because I was still back in the Army in the day. But
gotta get that medical retirement.
100%. I do plan on writing more. I'd like to kind of throw a nice article in there about microdosing. I think it's a cool tool that people can use, and it's a new movement that's becoming a household norm these days. So I'd like to throw my experiences in, and then along with the what we were talking about, the sort of path towards healing, introducing other things like meditation and psychedelics and the whole package, right? So
the holistic approach.
100%. I'd love to write some more articles, and they will be coming.
Awesome.
Well, you keep writing them, and we'll keep putting them in our newsletter. How about that?
Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah.
Awesome, buddy. Okay. Well, thanks again, and goodbye, everyone. And we'll chat later.
All right.